Welcome to People Unplugged, the podcast from the creative team at People Unboxed. I'm Westy, Digital Director at People Unboxed. This is the People Unplugged podcast. Welcome to the show. So my guest today has spent his entire career in sport. And by entire career, I mean entire career. From managing 45 sports clubs as a student union officer at the University of Manchester, through to British cycling during the golden era of the Olympic success, to the Rugby Football Union, where he's quietly doing possibly some of the most important structural work in English rugby right now. Chaston, thank you so much. Welcome to People Unplugged. How are you doing?
I'm good, mate. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. Not entire career. You forgot where I used to be assistant manager at a fish and chip shop.
Well, you can come to that now, because my first question is going to be, what have I missed? Tell me about you. Tell me about your career journey. How have you got to where you are now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always loved sport. Academically, I was always, okay. Worked hard when I needed to, but sport was almost always my thing. And chip shop aside, which was probably the first area of responsibility I ever had. The first serious job after university was in sport. And I'd volunteered in sport for the football club and then in the wider, what's known as the Athletic Union at the University of Manchester. And that just went on from there to be the chair of the Athletic Union, which I did for a couple. You're really supposed to do it for 1 year. I did it for 2 because I loved it so much.
Is that because no one else wanted it?
No.
Sorry, I'm laughing because the reason I asked that, my oldest daughter, she's head of student union. She goes to Cambridge up the road here, and she's head of student union there. And I said, "Oh, you must be handing over to someone else." And she said, "Yes. As soon as I can find someone else who wants to do it." I said, "What does that mean?" So potentially you're in it for life, right?
Yeah, it was a bit different. It was a bit different at Manchester. It was quite soon after a merger between the Victoria University of Manchester and UMist. Is literally about 3 years after that, and the now University of Manchester, the student union and the athletic union were actually a bit separate.
Right.
So mine was actually, rather than sort of a voluntary role, it was a full-time paid role that you had to interview for, etc. So it was a serious job, but it was probably the best job in the world, because open door policy, and you have volunteers of sports club coming in. Either just because they want to chat, they've got some problems to sort out. You're talking about the club development with them. You're talking about how they offer better opportunities for their prospective members. And we live for Wednesday afternoons. All the right. Fixtures on a Wednesday afternoon. There's loads of event-based clubs who'd go to events on weekends, and I just loved it. Just hearing about the wins, hearing about the trials and tribulations, and there's a big element of sort of pastoral care about it, and like a shoulder to lean on.
Yep.
And you just got to know so many amazing people, and that's probably where my love of working in sport really started. And I was like, this is really, for me, this is for life. And I didn't know exactly where, but that's where I really knew I wanted to spend my time.
And then after that, this is British cycling after that?
Yes.
At that time in British cycling as well, right?
Yeah, so that was really opportunistically, because I was still living in Manchester, and British Cycling was based at Sports City. So if anyone's ever been there, I think they've done even more work expanding it now. But that's where it was based, and I applied for a job as a development officer for clubs and volunteers. So really, really like aligned to the previous experience I'd had. And to be honest, a sport I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
I remember on the interview, they nearly didn't give me the job, because at that time the office was under the bottom of the velodrome, so they didn't have and since they've built a proper office, which we're in by the time I left, but it was sort of in these like giant cupboards really underneath the velodrome. Around the corridors, people are walking with their cycling shoes and their cleats on, right, which are clacking on the floor. And I was like, what's that sound like? What are they wearing specific shoes or like that? And I think they said to me afterwards, like, we nearly didn't give you the
you don't know much about this,
do you? Nothing about cycling. Obviously I know far more now, because I was there for about eight years or so.
And what was the day-to-day of that role originally then?
So that was very much And as you know, still relatively young person in the
Mm,
office 5 days a week, which I loved, around team of varying ages, but a lot of people kind of my sort of age as well. And people are in it because they love sport and they love that particular sport. So just being in and amongst people who really care about what they're doing, and it was about development of volunteers, development of people.
yeah,
My specific role was around actually about young people. At the time, they essentially brought me in where we're just starting this cycling award for young volunteers, and it was essentially their push to get more young people into volunteering in cycling. So drove that program forward to get kids who were already in cycling to look at volunteering, but also we did a load of courses in schools and that kind of thing to
yeah.
raise awareness of cycling, its opportunities, volunteering path, either in a club or at race events and that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, that's how I spent most of my time. That program, I wrote about this recently. In 2012, it was actually awarded the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Volunteering Award,
Wow.
and I got to meet the Queen.
Nice.
Yeah, got to shake the Queen's hand. That was amazing.
Fantastic. How much easier did that role become post 2012 and the Olympics and everything around that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing about sport, and generally, when you, because you know, I now work in. At the time, they're like, what do you have to do with like the elite squad then and all that kind of thing? And now I get it, and I work at the RFU England Rugby. They're like, oh, well, do you do anything with the men's team or the women's team? Um, and indirectly, I suppose the answer is yes, but my focus has always been grassroots.
Yeah.
Um, Having said that, with the profile and the funding that was coming in through lottery funding, which started, when was it? Around 2000, between 2004 and 2008. So we had a massive
Come on, I know
success
you're a better quizzer than that.
massive success, yeah, massive success in Beijing. You know, loads. That was really where it kicked off. The funding had kicked in, loads of gold medals, etc. It attracted sponsors and enabled us to invest more in uh, definitely the recreation side of it. So not just cycle sport, but actually recreational and trying to promote.
Yeah.
The sponsor was Sky at the time, so Sky Ride, and I've had other sponsors since. But getting more people on bikes, basically. So both for racing, but also, yeah, just recreationally and volunteers who would lead rides out in the local community all over the country. But it was definitely easy with the funding, attracting sponsorship, the profile of the sport sort of made it almost a bit, an easier sell. And sport generally is an easy sell because
Yeah.
of all the benefits it brings.
So the career so far you've taken us through university sport via British cycling, and we're going to get to RFU in a minute. And you said spanning development, volunteer programs, and now some of the work with the RFU. I'm really interested in digging in about the strategic governance piece you're working on. Can you think of were there pivotal moments in your career that shaped those transitions? For example, was the move from cycling to rugby a bit of a leap of faith, or is there actually a logical step and a reason why that happened?
A bit of both, really. So a couple of things. So in whilst I was in Manchester, I met my now wife, and she was living in London.
Right.
So at that point, I was on the hunt for a job back down south. I mean, I'm from Reading, but obviously I was living up north. So I was on the hunt for a job down south and had looked at a few things. And in sport, and you look at what are the other sports I want to work in, what are the other organisations I want to work in, and the RFU was definitely one of those. I think
Mm.
even before that, I'd previously applied for a job, got down to the final two, but not got the job. But this one, when I joined, was university partnerships manager. So it kind of married nicely the university experience, obviously, I'd had,
Yeah.
along with the sports development side of it. And I think at the time, and again, it was one where I didn't know, I played rugby as a kid a bit, but I didn't know loads about the sport. But I think they're quite like that. They wanted someone coming in who wasn't necessarily, a real rugby person at the time. So that was nice in terms of it, coincided quite nicely with the move. And yeah, sort of married my experience. And it was a leap of faith, as you say. But I think I'd been in various roles. I'd been at British Cycling for 8-9 years.
Yeah.
Promoted, I've moved departments, promoted again. and I suppose it just reached a point where it was
It just
time to
felt right,
try.
right? It's the next
Yeah, it
logical
was time
step
to
in
try
that way.
something
Yeah.
else. I think I got to a point where um, sport can be sometimes you don't necessarily in other career paths you get to a certain level and then your kind of career path is a bit more structured and laid out. In sport
Yeah.
it's not necessarily like that, so you have to make some of these choices to move sideways. Sometimes if you're the only way to get promoted is if your immediate boss leaves.
Yeah. It's all your
um
dead man shoes situation. Right. Gotcha. Yeah.
yeah, there's a bit of that. So yeah, I had made the decision to move, and it was a great move. Done various roles at the RFU now, but
We'll come to that in just a second.
yeah,
Before
yeah,
we
I'm
get
good
to
jumping
that,
ahead.
is it as glamorous as it sounds working in sport? Because I can imagine people listening. And when you and I spoke in the green room, and I was like, oh, British cycling, that's really cool. And I know this is ridiculous, but in my head, it's like, oh, you must have tickets to everything, and you must be able to see all this really cool stuff, and you must bump into, this cyclist and this rugby player every day, and they walk past you in the office. Is it as glamorous as that, or is it just a job?
I mean, ultimately, it's a job. Of course, it is, and I've never looked at it as glamorous as such.
Right.
But we were talking about this the other day with a few colleagues, just around there's some of the things you kind of forget. Like when I went for an interview um, to get the job at the RFU, I think they made a point at the time of they do interviews in boxes that literally overlooks the pitch. So you
You
go
must have
there,
been looking
you
over their
sort of
shoulder the whole time. I would
yeah,
have
and you're
been.
like, what? You're overawed by it. It's so impressive.
Yeah.
And to think, and it just gives you that extra sense of like, I would love to work here and kind of be in and amongst it. On a lunch break now you can go, oh, should we just go and do a lap? You can just go and like walk around the pitch, for example, and just sort of take
Yeah.
it all in. So it's that kind of thing that I've been there a while now, so you kind of take it for granted a little bit.
I was going to say it must become second nature almost. It's just where you go to work, right?
Yeah, yeah, and things like you talk about tickets. One of the staff benefits is you get access to. You still have to pay for them, but you get access to tickets.
Yeah.
But they're quite good at doing things. The little benefits that sometimes you get to watch the men or the women train. If they're doing a session at Twickenham, for example. So there's lots of bits and bobs around it, but it is cool to be in that
Yes.
environment. But the main thing, Westy, to be honest, is just generally working in sport and with the people you work with. I was saying earlier, um, I can probably list on one hand the amount of people I would say are bad people I've ever worked with. Like
Right.
people really care, like they love what they do and they're very passionate about it, and I consider myself lucky to be in a role in something that I love and
Yeah.
something that everybody knows is a good thing, I suppose, for society when you're in the kind of the development arm of it. And the way you see it, it links the professional and elite side, how that encourages more people to get involved in you see it with British cycling in the Olympics, you see it if we do well in Six Nations in tournaments, how that the women won the World Cup, a home World Cup,
Yeah.
which I took my daughter to recently, and how that inspires people. It's just there's a magic to it that you don't get everywhere.
I love that, and I can only equate that to. I know you said you're from Reading, and I don't know if football's one of your. I think you're a Reading fan, aren't you? Back in the day, so I'm an Ipswich Town season ticket holder, and I used to take my daughter to Ipswich, and a bit of a long story, but there was a guy sat behind us, and one of his frustrations would all be brought out with "you big girl" every time anything happened on a pitch, which was terrible. And there was a couple of, and it was really sad actually, because Meg, my daughter, said, "I don't want to go anymore. That bloke really annoys me." And at the time, we the Ipswich women's team were getting more and more prevalent. I said, "What about going to see the ladies play instead?" And honestly, it was like flicking the switch. She is so passionate about women's football now because of that. And it was really interesting. We were reflecting on it a few weeks back, and I said, "So why is it different though?" And she said, if they go down, I'm telling you, they're injured. And I was like, what? So there's bits and pieces like that. And she said, but we see the other fans. So you said about taking your daughters. Meg and I went to the women's Euro final. Well, God, that was a while back now. But the thing that really sticks for me wasn't just the atmosphere in Wembley, which was amazing, but it was the fact that we were sitting here. There was a Danish couple in front of us. There was German. It was a whole different level. But everyone there was there to support the spectacle of the sport rather than it being, because football can be quite tribal, right? But I just, it opened up a whole world to me of her saying, I love being involved with this. These people are really positive.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's almost, if you go to, I mean, going to Twickenham, going to a men's game and going to that I mean, that women's final was just completely different level.
Yeah.
But it does feel different. It's definitely more family orientated. Going to some of the women's games, I would say. Not that going to the men's games that you won't see families there, because you will. But just yeah, that overall experience, and everybody is, in a rugby game. I went to the men's game against Highlands, which we won't talk too much about recently. But we were sat right next to a bunch
we've
of
got
Island...
Irish listeners, right?
No, but we're...
Yeah, I can see that. I can almost hear the comments.
The Irish fans had a great day out. But we're all sat like in and amongst each other. There's no home and away.
No.
Everyone's just there to enjoy the spectacle of the sport. If your team isn't playing well that day, it's just, me, I'm like, it is what it is. I don't I think this is where I don't want to analyze fandom, but if some people's team loses, it affects their emotional mood for a month. I'm not that person.
Yeah.
You go for the spectacle. You mix with some really fun people who are there because they love sport, or they love rugby or whatever it is. And you just have that bit of banter, and it's a good laugh. And I don't know that I think you always get served some of the worst things when you're looking at social media of some things fans have done in a football environment and that kind of thing. But it's a bit more partisan, obviously, at football matches, I think, compared to rugby matches. But it's just the atmosphere is, all rugby matches really, especially the women's final, was just amazing. I mean, my daughter, she loved her. So that when the ball went over the posts, they all lit up in sparkly colours, and I had the fire things going and all that kind of stuff. That was the stuff she remembered, like the overall experience of it. And when we scored a try and all that kind of thing. Those are things she loves.
What makes me laugh though, I mean, how often have you taken her to a match?
So I took her to an early World Cup game down in Brighton, and then I took her to the final, which was, what was that, September?
You've set the bar pretty high, right? We were discussing this last week at a pub before Ipswich Millwall game, and somebody was saying, "Oh, I brought my son along. I took my daughter to her first game last week." So what was that? And he said, "Yeah, it was the 5-3 game, and and it's when we came from behind and all this stuff." And you think, yeah, you need to set the expectations. Sometimes it can be really drizzly and 0-0 and really naff.
Yeah, that is a danger. I think
where the fireworks?
Yeah,
no one singing.
I
remember taking. Sorry, I'm interrupting because I'm on my way now. I remember taking Meg to her first game. This was years ago. She was really little, and I said she loved it, absolutely loved it. And then she said, "Why is no one telling us what's happening?" So what do you mean? She said, "Well, where's the man? You sit on the telly?" And it was like, now that sounds ridiculous, but in her head that makes sense, right?
Yeah,
there's going to be someone who's commentating on this and telling you what's going on. Brilliant.
This slightly off topic, but my wife, it was, what World Cup was it? It was a men's cricket World Cup. Do you follow cricket?
Not particularly. I'll be honest. No, not really.
You might remember this. So I can't remember what year it was. It's a few years ago. Men's cricket World Cup, and we got to the final, and it went to like a sudden death over.
Right.
It went to a super over, like to decide it. And I think it was Jofra Archer who got given the ball to do the over. And my wife was referring to it as a champagne super over. And it was the most amazing game and the most amazing end to the game. She was like, "Well, don't need to watch cricket anymore. It's not going to get better than that." So
no, that's right. Can we go and watch a test match for 5 days, 3 of which will be rained off, and then whatever.
But that's something I'd want to talk to my kids about in the future. Is like, that's why you watch sport, for moments that could happen like that are just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's that coming from behind, isn't it, in the 93rd minute? It's all of those things. You're right. You have to be there. Let's get on to, if it's okay with you, let's get on to what you do now. So you said you're working with the RFU. I know you've been working through I don't know how much of this you can share with us, a governance and representation review, I think. Have I got that right?
Yeah.
Now, when you described it to me before, I'll be honest with you, it sounded like trying to rewire a plane while it was still flying. So I'm going to throw the ball over to you. Take us through what that is. And I guess, what are you trying to solve? And I think you mentioned before about the council and the board. So take us through what that is and why that's so important for the game.
Yeah. So this, I mean, I got into, when I started the RFU, was, as I said, university partnerships manager, but then I basically did a secondment in strategy when there wasn't really a strategy department. That's now grown, got a full-time job over there and done lots of kind of big strategic projects, and what we call sort of transformational change projects. But the governance structures, the council can commission a review every 5 years to look at the organisational structures of the union, whether they're effective, etc. So that's essentially where the review came from, and I got involved. I mean, it's been running now since the end of 2023. It's been quite a long period, and essentially it's to examine the structures, the interrelation between committees, decision making, but crucially, the RFU is a members organisation, so it's essentially most of the members are the clubs.
At the Premier level, or does it go lower than that?
All of them. So a
Oh, okay.
community club, yeah. So
Well, we're
you
Bedford
have
Blues here. Obviously, for me, they're literally just up the road. And I live on Goldington Road, and the Goldington Road's the ground. So, would they be a member of the RFU? Would they?
exactly, yeah.
Right.
So clubs are the members. There's slight difference between voting members and non-voting members, but I think majority of voting members. So something like around 1,400 members. But they're the ones ultimately with the ultimate power in terms of the rules, annual general meetings, that kind of thing. So what the reviews kind of really, and my role of it is project management. So and it's been a lot of stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management. So people have been involved from the council, all of council, board members, staff members. What we've done is a lot of interviews internally, consultation with the game, listening to what members' feedback about their issues, kind of when it comes to decision making and how their interests are represented. So it's been a kind of a long 2-year period to get to kind of where we are at the moment.
That's an extreme amount of plates you keep trying to keep spinning. Does it feel like you're trying to keep everyone happy?
I suppose a little bit, and a lot of it's around kind of negotiation, and
Yeah.
some people might have one point of view, others have got another, and often you meet in the middle. So there's definitely a certain amount of that. It's certainly not about keeping people happy, but at the end of the day, what's been proposed is the idea is it's a more effective way to get the members closer to decision making. I think that in the past, members haven't felt they know, to them it can be the RFU is this a big beast that sits in Twickenham and makes all these decisions, and they don't really know how it works.
Yeah.
And you can see that because, to be honest, a lot of clubs, what they really care about is the day to day and their club, how their club operates, the clubs around them, and really it's about people on Saturday turning up, playing matches, getting new people into the game, all that kind of stuff. So the governance stuff in the background, which a lot of people would find quite dry, it's just looking at trying to make decision making more efficient, but that members know kind of how their input is being heard, being taken into account, and crucially, it being shared back with them about how that influenced the decision. So that's what the review's kind of all been about.
Fantastic. If I'm going to show my ignorance now, but that's just the way I am. Does it hold more clout if you're higher up the higher, as in the Premier League teams have more say than the Championship team, for example?
No. So, it does.
I was
It doesn't
hoping you'd
matter.
say no, but
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter how big a club is. I suppose you've got the governance has changed a little bit. So now you have specific structures that will look after sort of the men's Premier League. You've got PRL that look after men's Prem, and there's a specific board now, the Men's Professional Rugby Board, which we have members on that look to make decisions collectively for that specific area.
Hmm.
But in terms of members, no, that it's every club has a vote. There's no kind of size difference in that or weight in that when it comes to an annual general meeting or that kind of thing.
I haven't set you up for this one, so good luck. If you could have a role in any sport, what role would you want? What's next? Where could you go? Any sport, any role. What would you want to do and why?
Apart from rolling back the clock and being either a professional footballer, a professional rugby
Well,
player,
can you do that?
professional tennis player.
I'm not saying you can't. That was literally a.
That's the dream when you're a kid, right?
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, let's assume that's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, it's not.
You'd be coming to it quite late, wouldn't you? Now.
Yeah. I don't know. Although, mate, when you look at what could you do? Chatting with some mates the other night, like, I reckon I could be good at curling. I reckon I could give it a go. And I think everyone thinks
you're handy
that.
with a brush,
I bet you it is so
you're handy with a
difficult.
broom.
Although there is a place near me where you can go and learn. I'm actually well up for that.
Right.
But no,
I think they call it shuffleboard now, don't they? You just don't have the little people with the brooms.
Yeah. I love all that, by the way.
I do.
Anything, shuffleboard,
Flight club, darts,
flight club, love flight club, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely love it. Anything where I could get my competitive edge out. What job would I want to do? I suppose there's things like, and I do love university sport, and I loved working in the university. So something like a director of sport one day at a university would be amazing, where you can kind of influence at that top level.
And I'm sensing a lot of that from what you're saying, and you've kind of already answered this, Chaston, which was I had the question about why sport. What is it about the sport world that's kept you in? What genuinely gets you out of bed with that? But I'm hearing more or as much about it being sport as being grassroots and making a difference.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about getting up in the morning, and I don't like to leave things unfinished. I'm conscientious about what I do, but it's because I care about what I do, and I think that's most people who work in my line of work. And you work with good people who bring out the best in you as well. Yes, it's definitely about the sport, and it's definitely about the impact it makes on people's lives. And you can see that, and there's so much research in the power of sport and why it should be invested in more. And I think that's now it's more important than ever. If you look at my kids are, well, one of them's 6 tomorrow, and then nearly 4.
Wow.
But my greatest fear is I don't want them to be sat indoors all day on tablets and all that kind of thing. And I think society today we're a bit more cautious about letting kids play outside on their own, and just being inside rather than outside in the fresh air, in nature, team building in sport, the kind of leadership qualities it can bring, the social opportunities it can bring, fitness, all of that kind of stuff. And that's the stuff I really believe in, and
Love
people
that.
who work in sport will as well. And just the people that you work with as well, because I think because of the nature of sport, I can think of bad examples in my career, but generally people want to see you develop as well. And I think that's where you don't come across many bad people in the industry, bad people as in who don't care.
Yes. Yeah.
People want to develop other people. They want to see people succeed. It's maybe in people's nature when they work in this kind of industry.
Love that. It's a really. I apologise in advance for this one because it's probably the toughest question I'm going to ask you. What's the most important thing you've learned about how people develop inside organisations, or you could even look at that the other way? What do organisations get wrong? If there was a takeaway for everything you've learned in your time working with people, whether it be young people or whatever it may be, how do people actually develop in organisations? What tips can you give people?
Honestly, the biggest point I think is around, and I think we talked about insights profiles when we had a little chat beforehand, right? Yeah. I'm of the opinion I think it swings with the job you're doing.
Love that. Yep.
I really do. So if you'd have, and if you asked my mates when we were younger, I was red. And this It
Yeah,
doesn't.
but Chaston, we're going to call red assertive, not aggressive, right? Because else we're going to upset everyone.
Yeah, we don't, and it doesn't, and it does not. When people say, "Oh, I'm a red" or "I'm a blue" or whatever, it doesn't
It's
define
not an
you. It's just,
excuse.
yeah,
No.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
it's just your, your subconscious preference or your conscious
Love
what you
that.
try to dial up and all that kind of stuff. So, but there is value in looking at people's insights profiles and where they kind of sit. But I would used to be more overtly kind of red tendencies in terms of decision making. Let's get this done, etc. And I've led a lot of teams in the past. Whereas the job I do now, in terms of strategic project management, I always joke that, well, I don't make any decisions. I have to get all the right information, put it in front of the decision makers. What are the risks? What are the trade-offs? And advise people and influence people as to what is the best decision you can come to. And by the nature, if you're not blue and the information analytical side of it, you're probably not going to be that. You're going to have to really dial up that side to be good at
Mm.
that role. So I think your kind of preferences swing depending on what type of role you're in. But the point I was trying to make about biggest learning is people learn in different ways. You
Yeah.
can't just assume that if you talk something out loud, people are going to understand it. Some people need the visual aid. Some people need to do things. Some people need to read something before a meeting, or they need to go away and think about it and evaluate in their own head.
And if
Or
they
they need,
don't be surprised when they turn up to that meeting. They spend 5 minutes going, "Sorry, what?" And they're very quiet. Exactly.
and that's something, especially operating at now quite a senior level, that
Mm.
you really have to think about how you're going to deliver something and what information you're sharing with some very, very busy, high profile people. So it's a lesson that kind of, and I've learned sharply through this in terms of how we operate at that level as well. It's kind of carried that thought, thinking about, well, how do people learn and how do people best want to be engaged? How do they want to be updated? It's people have different preferences, and trying to balance all that is kind of one of the arts of project management.
Fantastic. What a great answer to that question that was. And what almost a great place to end, because we're actually running slightly long, which is half hour, nearly gone.
Oh, I thought we'd only been about 5
Well, we've
minutes.
gone over half an hour already. We're fine. We're absolutely fine. I always close with the same last question, and it can involve sport. It doesn't have to. You can do anything. What's your ultimate weekend look like?
Ultimate weekend. Oh, that's a good question.
It's everyone's favourite question, and then everyone's like, ooh, the one they
No.
struggle the most with.
Well,
Because you don't want to upset anyone, because Hannah might listen. Your wife might listen back to this. So I'm just saying, be careful.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to think about it too much. So I would approach it as I would a holiday. And Hannah and I have this conversation quite a few times. But it revolves around the kids at the moment, and my
Great.
my priorities the family, priorities the kids. So I want to do stuff that keeps them on their toes, basically. So getting them out and about or getting them new experiences. They're at the age at the moment where they just like love anything new, and they take pleasure in such simple things, and just the joy that you see doing something new brings to them, whatever it is. So it'd be a weekend full of activities. There'd definitely be some chilling out when the kids are in bed, but yeah, keeping the kids on their toes, doing something new. At the moment, my youngest has started just loving kicking a football around, and I
Nice.
honestly did not push it on him. I did not. But he just
It's the wrong shaped ball, mate.
Yeah, well, yeah. But just anything with a ball, to be honest, just the unbridled joy. They're both
Nice.
into just like hitting tennis balls around, just stuff like that. Yeah, a weekend full of that kind of activities. And if someone could look after the kids in the evening, so I can go out for a nice meal with my other half, that would be amazing.
Fantastic. What a great answer. Right. We're going to have to stop it there because, like I say, we're close to 35. Chaston, I knew we'd have tons to talk about. Thanks so much for being open and honest with us and taking you through your stories. As soon as I heard so much about sport, I thought, I've got to talk to you about this. And we haven't even gotten to talk about, Ipswich and Reading yet. But we'll do that in the green room. There's one if we want to drop a load of listeners. But seriously for now, mate, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And I'll catch you on the other side.
Cheers, Westy. Pleasure.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Feeling curious to learn more about how we help people remember stuff? Well, why not sign up for a free trial of our AI-powered bite-sized learning app, BentoBot? You can do that easily at bentobot.com. And you can catch up on interviews with all of our previous guests by subscribing to this pod via Apple Podcasts or any podcast platform. until next time, take care.